The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Claire stared at her computer screen. Another Tuesday. Another endless spreadsheet. Another day where the numbers blurred together, till she couldn't tell if she was looking at profit margins or just random figures her tired brain had invented. She rubbed her eyes and glanced at the clock. 3 in the afternoon. Still 2 more hours before she could escape this gray cubicle and head home to her tiny apartment. 32 years old, and this was her life. Data analyst at a mid-sized insurance company. It wasn't terrible. It paid the bills. But it certainly wasn't what she dreamed about as a kid. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from her friend Lisa. Coffee break. I'm dying here. 10 minutes later, they sat in the break room with lukewarm coffee from the machine that never quite got the temperature right. Lisa was scrolling through her phone when she suddenly perked up. Oh, look at this. The Riverside Theater is doing some kind of talent showcase next month. Says it's open to anyone. Lisa showed her the bright yellow flyer on her screen. We should totally do something. When's the last time we did anything fun? Claire laughed. What would we even do? I can barely carry a tune in the shower. Come on. You used to play piano, right? I remember you mentioning that once. Something shifted in Claire's chest. A feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was like a door she'd locked and forgotten about suddenly rattled on its hinges. That was a long time ago, she said quietly. I haven't really played since high school. Maybe a little in college, but nothing serious. So, it's an amateur showcase. That's literally the point. Lisa grinned. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? That evening, Claire found herself standing in front of the upright piano in her apartment. It had belonged to her grandmother, and when she'd passed away 5 years ago, nobody else in the family wanted it. Claire had taken it, though she wasn't sure why. It just felt wrong to let it go to strangers. She lifted the keyboard cover. Dust particles danced in the evening light. She pressed middle C, the note rang out, slightly out of tune but still recognizable. She played a simple scale. Her fingers felt stiff, unfamiliar with the movement. It was like trying to write with her non-dominant hand, but something about the sound pulled at her. Memories flooded back. Saturday mornings at Mrs. Park's house, practicing while her teacher nodded encouragement. The school recital where she'd played Chopin, and her mom had cried in the audience. The acceptance letter to the music program at the state university that she'd turned down because the scholarship wasn't enough and her family couldn't afford the rest. Life had gotten in the way. Student loans for her business degree. Entry-level jobs that demanded 60-hour weeks. A relationship that fell apart. Bills that needed paying. The piano had become furniture, a surface to stack mail on, a reminder of something she used to be. Claire pulled out her laptop and found the talent showcase website. Her finger hovered over the registration button. This was ridiculous. She hadn't performed in over 15 years. She worked in an office. She was practical, responsible, realistic. She clicked submit before she could talk herself out of it. The confirmation email arrived immediately. Along with details about a mandatory meeting for all participants the following Thursday evening, Claire felt a mixture of excitement and terror. What had she just done? Thursday came too quickly. The Riverside Theater was beautiful in that old, slightly worn way that historic buildings have. Red velvet seats, ornate ceiling details, the faint smell of wood polish and decades of performances. About 30 people milled around the lobby, all there for the meeting. Claire noticed him immediately. He stood near the front, talking to the event organizer, holding himself with the posture of someone who'd spent years being told he was exceptional. Tall, maybe late 40s, with graying hair and an expensive-looking sweater. He had the kind of face that would be handsome if it weren't set in such a permanent expression of mild disapproval. "Everyone, please take a seat," the organizer called out. "I want to introduce you to our panel of judges for the showcase. This is Richard Thornton. Many of you might know him from his performances with the City Symphony. He's a classically trained concert pianist and has graciously agreed to be our lead judge." Richard gave a modest nod, though something in his expression suggested he didn't think it was particularly gracious of him. It was more like he was doing everyone a favor. The organizer went over the rules. Each performer would have up to 10 minutes. Any talent was welcome. The judges would select a winner who'd receive a small cash prize and the opportunity to perform at the theater's annual gala. I'd like each of you to briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you'll be performing, the organizer said. One by one, people stood up. A woman who'd be singing jazz standards, a teenage boy with a guitar, a middle-aged man doing comedy, a violinist. When it was Claire's turn, she stood up, her palms suddenly sweaty. Hi, I'm Claire. I'll be playing piano. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2? She heard a few whispers. Someone behind her muttered something that sounded like ambitious. But it was Richard's reaction that she noticed most. He looked up from his notes, his eyebrows raised. His eyes traveled from her face, down to her hands, and back up again. Then he did something that made Claire's stomach tighten. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've already decided you're going to fail, and they're almost looking forward to watching it happen. After the meeting ended, Claire was heading toward the exit when she heard footsteps behind her. Excuse me. Claire, was it? She turned. Richard stood there, his hands in his pockets, that same thin smile on his face. Right. I couldn't help but notice your choice of piece. Rachmaninoff's Second. That's quite an ambitious selection. He said the word ambitious the way someone might say foolish. I've always loved it, Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. Have you performed it before? Publicly, I mean, no, but I've played parts of it. Years ago. He nodded slowly. And you work as a... What did you say? I didn't, but I'm a data analyst. I see. His eyes flicked to her hands again. You know, the Rachmaninoff Second is considered one of the most technically demanding pieces in the Romantic repertoire. The octave stretches alone require years of conditioning. Most professional pianists spend months preparing it. He paused. Perhaps you might consider something more manageable? A nice Mozart sonata, maybe. Or even some Chopin. Something more suited to your... current level. The way he said current level made it clear what he really meant. Your amateur level. Your insufficient level. You're going to embarrass yourself level. Claire felt heat rising in her cheeks. Part of her wanted to thank him and slink away. Pick something easier. Or maybe just withdraw from the whole thing entirely. But another part of her, a part she'd forgotten existed, felt something different. Anger, determination. The stubborn streaker Mother always said would either save her or get her in trouble. Thank you for the advice, Claire said, her voice quieter than she intended. But I think I'll stick with my choice. Richard's smile widened slightly, but his eyes stayed cold. Well then, I suppose we'll see how it goes. Best of luck to you, Claire. He walked away, and Claire stood there in the empty lobby, her heart pounding. Through the theater doors, she could see the stage, the grand piano, sitting in the spotlight. What had she gotten herself into? Claire didn't sleep well that night. Richard's words kept replaying in her mind. That condescending smile. The way he'd looked at her hands like they were inadequate tools for the job. The barely concealed certainty that she would fail. She got up at 6 a.m, exhausted but unable to stay in bed. She made coffee and sat at the piano before she even got dressed for work. Her fingers found the keys and she started with scales. Just basic warm-ups. Her hands felt clumsy, like they belonged to someone else. By the time she had to leave for the office, she'd been playing for 90 minutes. Her fingers ached. She hadn't built up the stamina yet. But something had shifted. Richard's dismissal had lit a fire in her that she didn't know still existed. At work, she couldn't focus. The spreadsheets meant nothing. During lunch, instead of scrolling through social media, she watched videos of famous pianists performing the Rachmaninoff. She studied their hand positions, the way they moved, the emotion on their faces. She'd forgotten how beautiful the piece was, how powerful. That evening, she went straight to the piano. 2 hours passed before she even noticed. Her downstairs neighbor knocked on the wall. She'd been playing too loud, too long. Claire apologized through the floor and switched to quieter practice. But she didn't stop. By the end of the week, her fingers were raw. Small splits had appeared on her fingertips from the friction against the keys. She'd barely practiced like this since she was 17, preparing for her final recital before graduation. Back when she still thought music might be her future, Sunday afternoon, Claire sat at her kitchen table with her phone. She'd been thinking about this all week. Finally, she pulled up her contacts and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in years. Mrs. Park. Her old piano teacher. She hesitated. Mrs. Park would be in her late 80s now. Did she still teach? Was she even still alive? Claire felt guilty for not keeping in touch. After she'd turned down the music program and chosen business school instead, she'd been too ashamed to face her old teacher. Mrs. Park had believed in her so much. She pressed call before she could overthink it. The phone rang 4 times. Claire was about to hang up when someone answered. Hello? The voice was older, more fragile than she remembered, but unmistakably Mrs. Park. Mrs. Park? This is Claire. Claire Anderson. I don't know if you'll remember me. I was your student about 15 years ago. There was a pause. Claire, of course I remember you. You played that beautiful Chopin nocturne at the spring recital. Made everyone cry, including me. Claire felt her throat tighten. You remember that? I remember all my students, dear. Especially the ones with real talent. Another pause. What can I do for you? Please don't tell me you're calling to say you're getting married and want me to play at the wedding. These hands don't work like they used to. Claire laughed, surprised by how good it felt. No, nothing like that. I need help. I signed up for this showcase. I'm going to perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, and I haven't seriously practiced in years. And there's this judge who basically told me I'm going to fail. And I don't even know why I'm doing this. But I can't back out now, she heard Mrs. Park chuckle softly. The second concerto. You always did aim high. That's what I liked about you. Is it crazy? Be honest. Crazy? Maybe impossible. No. Mrs. Park was quiet for a moment. I'm at Riverside Gardens now. It's a retirement home. They have a piano in the common room. Not a great one, but it works. Can you come by tomorrow evening? You'd help me? Even though you chose a practical career over music, Claire, I taught for 50 years. Most of my students became accountants and lawyers and teachers. Only a handful became professional musicians. That doesn't mean I love them any less. Come at 6. Bring sheet music. Claire arrived at Riverside Gardens the next evening with her worn copy of the Rachmaninoff score. The facility was nicer than she expected. Clean, bright, with artwork on the walls. The receptionist directed her to the common room. Mrs. Park sat in a wheelchair near the piano. She looked smaller than Claire remembered, more fragile. Her hands, once so strong and precise on the keys, were gnarled with arthritis. But her eyes were still sharp, still full of that fierce intelligence Claire remembered from her lessons. You look exactly the same, Mrs. Park said, maybe a bit more tired around the eyes. I work with spreadsheets all day. It's aging me prematurely. We'll sit down. Let's hear what we're working with. Claire sat at the piano. It was an old upright, the keys slightly yellowed, the tone a bit tinny, but it would work. She took a breath and started. Playing the opening passage of the concerto, she made it about 3 minutes before Mrs. Park held up a nay. Hands stop, start again from measure 12, Claire did. Mrs. Park stopped her again after 20 seconds. Your technique is there. Rusty, but there. You know what's missing? About 15 years of practice. No, Mrs. Park wheeled closer. Hart, you're playing the notes, but you're not playing the music. Why did you choose this piece? Claire thought about it. I've always loved it. The emotion in it. The way it builds and falls and builds again. It feels like life, I guess. All the struggle and beauty mixed together. Could now play it like that. Don't think about that, Judge. Don't think about failing. Think about why this music matters to you. Show me what you hear in your head when you close your eyes and just listen. Claire started again. This time she tried to let go. She thought about all the years she'd spent in that gray cubicle. The dreams she'd put aside. The part of herself she'd locked away because it wasn't practical. She thought about Richard's dismissive smile and how it made her feel small. Her fingers moved faster, more confident. The notes flowed together. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was real. When she finished the section, she looked up. Mrs. Park had tears in her eyes. There it is. That's what I remember. That's the Claire who made everyone in the audience feel something. She wheeled even closer. Now we just need to refine it. You have 6 weeks until the showcase. 5.5 now. Then we'd better get started. Can you come 3 times a week? I'll make it work. Good, because I'm going to push you harder than I did when you were 17. Your fingers are out of shape. Your stamina is terrible. And you're going to want to quit at least a dozen times before we're done. Claire smiled. I can handle it. We'll see. Mrs. Park picked up the sheet music and marked several passages with a pencil. Start with these sections. 2 hours every night. I want you to practice until your hands hurt. Then take a break. Then practice some more. Buy some lotion for those fingers. You're going to need it. Over the next month, Claire's life transformed into a routine she hadn't experienced since high school. Wake up. Practice for an hour. I'll go to work. Count down the minutes. Rush home. Practice for 2 more hours. 3 evenings a week, drive to Riverside Gardens and work with Mrs. Park. Her coworkers noticed the change. She turned down happy hour invitations. Stopped chatting by the coffee machine. Lisa asked if she was okay. Claire just said she was busy with a project. She didn't tell anyone at work about the showcase. If she failed, she didn't want them to know she'd tried. Her fingers developed calluses. The splits healed and toughened. The passages that seemed impossible in week 1 became manageable by week 3. By week 4, she could play through the entire first movement without major mistakes. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Mrs. Park was relentless. Again, the crescendo isn't building enough. Again, you're rushing the tempo. Again, where's the emotion? You're playing like a computer. Show me you're human. There were nights Claire sat in her car outside Riverside Gardens and cried from frustration. Nights she wanted to email the organizer and withdraw. Nights she heard Richard's voice in her head telling her it was too ambitious, too difficult. It's too much for someone like her. But she didn't quit. 2 weeks before the showcase, something clicked. She was practicing the adagio movement, the slow, achingly beautiful section that had always been her favorite. She wasn't thinking about technique or tempo or any of the technical details. She was just feeling the music. When she finished, she opened her eyes. Mrs. Park was smiling. That's it. You've found it. Now you just need to do that on stage, in front of 500 people, with that insufferable judge staring at you. Act. Claire laughed nervously. No pressure. You can do this. I wouldn't have agreed to help if I didn't believe that. Mrs. Park reached out and took Claire's hand. You have something that man Richard will never have, no matter how many years he's trained. What's that? You play like someone who lost something precious and fought to get it back. That desperation, that hunger, that joy, you can hear it in every note. Technical perfection is impressive. But real emotion? That's what changes people. Claire squeezed her teacher's hand. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until after the performance. If you mess up, I'm taking back every nice thing I said. They both laughed. But Claire felt something solid settle in her chest. Confidence, not the arrogant kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you've done the work. The showcase was in 12 days. The day of the showcase arrived faster than Claire expected. She woke up at 5 in the morning, her stomach churning. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself on stage, her fingers freezing. Forgetting everything she'd practiced, she got out of bed and went straight to the piano. Just light practice. Mrs. Park had warned her not to overdo it the day of the performance. Your muscles need to be loose, not exhausted, she'd said. Claire played through some of her favorite passages, just enough to feel the keys under her fingers. To remind herself that she knew this piece by noon, she couldn't sit still. She tried to eat lunch, but only managed a few bites of toast. Her hands felt cold. She ran them under warm water, flexed her fingers, did all the warm-up exercises Mrs. Park had taught her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Good luck tonight. You're going to be amazing. Sorry I can't make it work, emergency. But you've got this." Claire smiled at the screen, though disappointment tugged at her. She hadn't invited anyone else. Her parents lived 3 states away, and she hadn't even told them about the showcase. If she failed, she didn't want an audience of people who knew her. It felt easier that way. At 4 o'clock, she started getting ready. She'd borrowed a black dress from her cousin. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy. She wanted the focus to be on the music, not on her. She put on minimal makeup, pulled her hair back into a low bun. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a pianist. Or at least, she looked like someone pretending to be one. The drive to the Riverside Theater felt surreal. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Claire gripped the steering wheel, her palms sweating despite the air conditioning. She kept running through the opening measures in her head, her fingers twitching slightly as if playing invisible keys. She arrived at 6, an hour before the showcase started. The parking lot was already half full. Performers were supposed to arrive early to check in and warm up. Claire grabbed her sheet music, though she had the piece memorized. It just felt safer to have it with her. Inside, the theater buzzed with nervous energy. Performers clustered in small groups, some laughing too loudly, others pacing. Claire recognized a few faces from the meeting weeks ago. The jazz singer stood by the water fountain doing vocal exercises. The teenage guitarist sat in a corner, eyes closed. Fingers moving through chord progressions in the air. Performers. Please head backstage for check-in. A woman with a clipboard called out Claire, followed the others through a side door and down a narrow hallway. Backstage was a controlled chaos. Sound technicians tested microphones. Stagehands adjusted lighting. The woman with the clipboard checked names off a list and handed out numbers. "You're number 14, she told Claire. "That means you'll go on about halfway through the show. There's a warm-up room down the hall if you need it. Show starts at 7 sharp. It's 14. Claire held the small paper with her number on it. 14 out of 26 performers. She'd have to sit through 13 other acts first, her nerves building with each one. She found the warm-up room. It was small, with an old upright piano against one wall. 2 other performers were there. A woman tuning a violin and a man doing breathing exercises. Claire sat at the piano and played quietly, just running through difficult passages, keeping her fingers loose. At 6:45, a stagehand poked his head in. 5 minutes to curtain. All performers should head to the green room. The green room wasn't actually green. It was a cramped space with folding chairs and a small television monitor showing the stage. Performers would wait here, watching the others perform, until their number was called. Claire found a seat near the back. The lights dimmed on the monitor. She could hear the muffled sound of the audience settling in, conversations dying down. Then the MC walked onto the stage. Through the monitor, Claire could see the audience. Row after row of people. Hundreds of them. Her stomach dropped. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Riverside Theater Amateur Talent Showcase." Applause rippled through the crowd. "We have an incredible lineup tonight. 26 talented performers ready to share their gifts with you. Please welcome our first act, Nathan Chen, performing an original comedy routine." The comedian walked onto the stage. Claire watched on the monitor as he launched into his set. The audience laughed in the right places. He seemed comfortable, natural. When he finished, the applause was warm and encouraging. Act after act went by. The jazz singer had a beautiful voice, rich and smooth. She got a standing ovation from several people in the front row. The teenage guitarist was nervous, stumbling over a few chords, but the audience was kind. A ballet dancer performed a contemporary piece that was genuinely moving. A man played the saxophone with impressive skill. Claire noticed the judges in the front row. Richard sat in the center, stone-faced, making notes on a pad of paper. He clapped politely after each performance, but his expression never changed. Even when acts were clearly good, he showed no reaction. By the 10th performer, Claire's heart was racing. Her hands felt ice cold again. She rubbed them together, trying to generate warmth. A woman next to her noticed. First time performing? She asked. In a very long time, Claire admitted. Me too. I'm number 16. I keep thinking about just running out the back door. The woman laughed nervously. What are you doing? Piano you? Singing opera, which is probably insane. But here we are. They shared a look of mutual understanding. Two people who'd probably spent weeks questioning their life choices, but were too stubborn or too committed to back out now. Number 13, you're up next. Number 14, please be ready. Claire stood up. Her legs felt shaky. She walked toward the stage entrance, where a stagehand waited with a headset. On the monitor, performer 13 finished. A poetry reading that was actually pretty good. The audience clapped. The MC walked back onto the stage. Thank you, Brian. Wonderful piece. Our next performer is Claire Anderson, who will be playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Claire heard a few murmurs from the audience. She couldn't tell if they were impressed or skeptical. Probably both. The stagehand touched her shoulder. You're on. Good luck. Claire walked onto the stage, and the world suddenly became very small and very large at the same time. The stage lights were blinding, white-hot circles of illumination that made it impossible to see past the first few rows. But she could feel them. 500 people, sitting in darkness, watching her. Waiting, the grand piano sat center stage, gleaming black under the lights. It was beautiful. Much nicer than the beat-up upright in the warm-up room, or even her grandmother's piano at home. She walked to it, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent theater. She adjusted the bench, sat down. The keys stretched out before her, black and white, familiar and terrifying. She could hear her own breathing, amplified by the silence. Someone in the audience coughed. Claire looked out into the darkness. She couldn't see faces, but she knew Richard was out there, sitting in judgment, waiting for her to prove him right. Waiting for her to fail, her hands hovered over the keys. They were shaking. She could see them trembling in the stage lights. This was it. Weeks of preparation, hours of practice, bleeding fingers and sleepless nights, all coming down to this moment. What if she forgot everything? What if her fingers froze? What if she proved Richard right and humiliated herself in front of hundreds of people? The silence stretched on. It must have only been a few seconds, but it felt like forever. The audience was getting uncomfortable. She could sense it. The energy in the room shifting from anticipation to concern. Claire closed her eyes. She thought about Mrs. Park's words. You play like someone who lost something precious and fought to get it back. She thought about all the mornings at her cubicle, staring at spreadsheets, feeling like something vital was missing from her life. She thought about her 17-year-old self, turning down the music scholarship because it was the practical choice. She thought about Richard's condescending smile, and then she thought about none of those things. She just thought about the music, the beauty of it, the reason she'd fallen in love with this piece in the first place, the way it made her feel when she heard it, like her heart was breaking and healing at the same time. She took one deep breath. Her fingers touched the keys. The opening chord of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 rang out through the theater, and everything else disappeared. The first few measures came out tentative. Her fingers were stiff from nerves, the tempo slightly uncertain. She could hear the imperfection. Richard could definitely hear it. Part of her brain started to panic. But then something happened. The music took over. Her fingers found their rhythm. The melody began to flow. All the hours of practice, all the muscle memory, all the emotion she'd poured into this piece over the past 6 weeks came flooding back through her hands and into the keys. The notes cascaded like water, building and falling, soft passages giving way to thundering crescendos. Her body swayed slightly with the music. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was just feeling, just playing. She forgot about the audience, forgot about the judges, forgot about everything except the conversation between her fingers and the piano. This beautiful, desperate, soaring conversation that Rachmaninoff had. Claire moved into the second movement, the Adagio. This was the soul of the piece. The part that had made her fall in love with Rachmaninoff all those years ago. Slow, achingly beautiful. Every note heavy with emotion. Her fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness she didn't know she possessed. This wasn't about technical skill anymore. This was about something deeper. Every regret she'd ever had, every dream she'd pushed aside, every moment she'd felt small or dismissed or invisible, it all poured out through the music. In the audience, people had stopped shifting in their seats. The usual rustling of programs had ceased. Even the people who'd been checking their phones had put them away. Something was happening on stage that demanded attention. Claire's eyes were still closed. She was somewhere else now. Not in the theater. Not on stage. She was inside the music itself, living in the spaces between the notes. The melody seemed to hang in the air, suspended, each phrase a question that the next phrase answered. She could feel tears trying to form behind her closed eyelids. But she couldn't let them fall. Not yet. She had to finish. The adagio built slowly, carefully, like someone building a tower of cards. One wrong move and it would all collapse. But her hands knew what to do. They remembered. The movement reached its peak, a moment of pure, crystalline beauty, before gently resolving. The final notes faded into silence. For a heartbeat, the theater held its breath. Then she launched into the third movement, the allegro. Fast, passionate, demanding every ounce of technical skill she possessed. Her fingers became a blur across the keys. This was where all those hours of practice mattered. The calluses she'd built up. The muscle memory she'd drilled into her hands until they ached. The tempo was relentless. Her wrists stayed loose, her posture perfect, just like Mrs. Park had taught her. The notes tumbled over each other in controlled chaos, building toward the finale. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her breath came faster. But her fingers never faltered. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. This was why she'd loved music. Not because she wanted to be famous or impressive, but because of this feeling, this sense of being completely present, completely herself, holding nothing back, the piece built toward its conclusion. Massive chords, thundering through the theater. Her entire body was engaged now, leaning into the keys, drawing every bit of sound from the instrument. The chandelier above the audience seemed to vibrate with the intensity, and then the final chord. She struck it with everything she had. Let it ring out, full and complete and triumphant. The sound faded slowly into silence. Claire sat there, her hands still on the keys, her chest heaving. She slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The stage lights brought her back. The theater. The showcase. 500 people sitting in the darkness. Nothing happened. The silence stretched on. No applause. No sound at all. Just absolute, crushing quiet. Claire's heart sank. She'd failed. She'd messed it up somehow and hadn't even realized it. The audience was too polite to walk out, but too disappointed to clap. This was worse than she'd imagined. At least if they'd booed, it would have been a reaction. She started to stand up, ready to walk off stage in humiliation. Then it started. One person in the audience stood up, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire theater was on its feet. The applause hit her like a physical wave. It wasn't polite or obligatory. It was thunderous. People were actually cheering. Claire stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. Someone in the balcony whistled. The applause didn't stop. It kept going, building, filling the theater with sound that seemed to shake the walls. She looked toward the judges' table in the front row. 2 of the judges were standing, clapping enthusiastically. And Richard. Richard Thornton was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. His hands were raised, clapping, but his face looked stunned. Like he'd just witnessed something he hadn't thought possible. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were wide. The pen he'd been using to take notes had fallen onto the table, forgotten. He looked like a man whose entire understanding of the world had just been challenged. Claire gave a small bow, her hands shaking. The applause continued. She didn't know what to do. She'd never experienced anything like this. Finally, she walked off stage, her legs unsteady. The moment she got into the wings, her knees almost gave out. A stagehand steadied her. "That was incredible," the woman whispered. "I've been working here for 12 years and I've never heard anything like that." Claire just nodded, unable to form words. She made her way back to the green room in a daze. The other performers, who were still waiting, looked at her with a mixture of awe and intimidation. The opera singer who'd sat next to her earlier gave her a thumbs up. "Well, we're all screwed now," she said with a nervous laugh. "How are we supposed to follow that?" Claire sank into a chair, her entire body trembling. She'd done it. Actually done it. And people had loved it. They'd stood up for her. She kept replaying that moment in her mind. The silence, then the explosion of applause. The showcase continued. Claire barely paid attention to the remaining performers. She wasn't being rude. She was just trying to process what had happened. Her hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was slowly wearing off, leaving her exhausted. After the final performer finished, all 26 of them were called back onto the stage. They lined up in a row while the MC thanked everyone for coming. The judges were invited to make brief comments. The first judge spoke about the incredible talent they'd seen tonight. The second talked about how difficult it was to choose just one winner. Then Richard stood up. He walked to the microphone at the side of the stage. "I've been involved in music my entire life," he said, his voice carrying through the theater. "I've performed in concert halls around the world. I've judged countless competitions. And I'll be honest with you. When I saw the lineup tonight, I had certain expectations." He paused, looking down the line of performers until his eyes found Claire. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Sometimes you encounter a performance that reminds you why you fell in love with music in the first place. Tonight, we witnessed several of those performances, but one in particular, ... He trailed off, seemed to collect himself. One performance transcended technical skill and became something else entirely. It became art. Claire felt her face flush. People in the audience were turning to look at her. They knew who he was talking about. "Music isn't just about hitting the right notes," Richard continued. "It's about conveying emotion. It's about making people feel something they didn't expect to feel. It's about truth. And tonight, we heard truth." He returned to his seat. The MC thanked the judges and explained that they would deliberate briefly before announcing the winner. All the performers were ushered backstage again. In the green room, people congratulated each other. The violinist hugged the ballet dancer. The comedian shook hands with the guitarist. There was a strange sense of camaraderie now that it was over. They'd all survived. They'd all put themselves out there. Claire stood off to the side, still processing everything. A woman approached her. Older, well-dressed, with kind eyes. "I just wanted to tell you," the woman said. "My daughter is 10. She's been taking piano lessons for 3 years, but she wants to quit. She says it's too hard. I brought her tonight because I thought it might inspire her. When you played, I looked over at her, and she was crying. After you finished, she turned to me and said, 'I want to keep playing, so thank you. You changed something for her tonight.'" The woman walked away before Claire could respond. Claire felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd spent so many years thinking music was a frivolous dream, something impractical, something she had to give up to be a responsible adult. But she'd forgotten that music could do this, could reach people, could change them. "All performers, please return to the stage for the announcement," a stagehand called. They filed back out. The theater had gotten even more crowded. People must have called friends, told them to come watch. The energy in the room was electric. The MC held an envelope. The classic, dramatic setup. Claire's heart pounded. Winning suddenly felt important in a way it hadn't before. Not because of the prize money or the opportunity to perform at the gala, but because it would mean she'd been right to try, right to risk failure, right to believe in herself when someone like Richard had dismissed her. "The judges have made their decision," the MC said. This was apparently the easiest decision they've ever made. They were unanimous. The winner of this year's Riverside Theater Amateur Talent Showcase is, the pause felt infinite, Claire Anderson. For her stunning performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the audience erupted again. Claire stood there, shocked, as the other performers around her clapped and patted her back. The jazz singer hugged her. The teenage guitarist high-fived her. She walked forward to accept the small trophy and envelope. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped them. The MC asked if she wanted to say anything. Claire looked out at the audience. At the sea of faces she couldn't quite see in the stage lights. At Richard, who was now standing, clapping slowly, deliberately, his expression unreadable but definitely changed. "I just want to say thank you," Claire managed, her voice barely steady. "I almost didn't do this. I almost talk." The lobby of the Riverside Theater buzzed with conversation after the showcase ended. People clustered in groups, discussing the performances, still energized by what they'd witnessed. Claire stood near the refreshment table, clutching her trophy. Trying to process everything that had just happened, a steady stream of people approached her. An elderly man who said he'd been attending theater events for 40 years and had never been so moved. A music teacher who asked if she'd consider doing a masterclass for her students. A young woman who took a photo of Claire and the trophy, saying she wanted to remember this moment when she needed courage to try something scary. Claire smiled and thanked them all. But it felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life. Just this morning, she'd been terrified. Now people were treating her like she'd done something extraordinary. "Excuse me, Claire?" She turned. Richard Thornton stood behind her, his hands in his pockets. Up close, she could see he looked older than she'd first thought. Tired. The confidence he'd worn so easily at the first meeting had been replaced by something else. Something almost vulnerable. "Mr. Thornton," Claire said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Richard, please." He paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "I owe you an apology." A significant one, Claire waited. Part of her wanted to make this easy for him. Part of her wanted to hear him say it all. "When we met at the orientation, I made a snap judgment about you. About your abilities. About what you were capable of achieving." He looked directly at her now. "I was completely, profoundly wrong. What you did tonight. I've been playing piano for 42 years. I've performed with symphonies. I've played in some of the finest concert halls in the world. And I'm not sure I've ever moved an audience the way you did tonight." "Thank you," Claire said quietly. "No, you don't understand." Shh. Richard shook his head. "I need to explain something. When I was young, I had technical perfection. Every note exact, every tempo precise. My teachers said I was gifted, and I believed them. I built my entire identity around being the best, the most skilled, the most accomplished." He looked away. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started playing in the first place. I forgot about the joy of it, the connection. Tonight, watching you play, I realized what I've been missing for decades." Claire didn't know what to say. This man who dismissed her so easily was now standing in front of her, exposed and honest. "You played with your soul," Richard continued. "Every note meant something. You weren't showing off. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just sharing something beautiful. That's what music is supposed to be. And I'd forgotten that." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "This is my contact information. The conservatory where I teach is hosting a gala next month. We feature guest artists. The performances are attended by some of the most influential people in the city's music community. I would be honored if you would consider performing." Claire took the card, staring at it. "You want me to perform? At a conservatory? I know what you're thinking. You're not a professional. You have a day job. You haven't trained formally in years. And none of that matters." Richard smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. "What you have is something that can't be taught. You have heart. You have authenticity. That's more valuable than a dozen music degrees." "I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. That's all I ask." Richard extended his hand. "And again, I'm sorry. For underestimating you. For being dismissive. You taught me something important tonight. You reminded me what music is really about." They shook hands. As Richard walked away, Claire looked down at the business card in her hand. This was real. This was actually happening. There you are. Mrs. Park's voice cut through the noise. Claire turned to see her old teacher being wheeled through the lobby by one of the nursing staff from Riverside Gardens. Mrs. Park's face was radiant, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mrs. Park, you came." Claire rushed over. "Of course I came. You think I'd miss this? I told the nurse I was coming, even if she had to wheel me here herself."
Ow.
Mrs. Park grabbed Claire's hands. "I knew you could do it. I knew it from the first day you walked back into my life. But actually watching you up there, Claire, you were magnificent. I couldn't have done it without you." Nonsense. "I just reminded you what was already inside you. That performance came from you. From everything you've experienced, everything you've overcome." Mrs. Park squeezed her hands tighter. "I'm so proud of you. Not because you won, but because you were brave enough to try." They talked for a while longer, and Claire promised to visit soon. After Mrs. Park left, Claire found herself alone again near the Nauer refreshment table. The lobby was clearing out. The adrenaline was finally fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Oh my God, just saw on social media you won. Claire, call me immediately." Claire smiled. Apparently word traveled fast. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Then another. People she hadn't talked to in years were reaching out. Someone had posted a video clip of her performance. It was already being shared. She drove home in a daze, the trophy sitting in the passenger seat. When she pulled into her apartment complex, she just sat in the car for a while, staring at her building. Tomorrow, she'd have to go back to work. Back to the cubicle, the spreadsheets, the fluorescent lights. The thought made her chest tighten, but something had shifted. She couldn't go back to the way things were. She couldn't pretend tonight hadn't happened. Claire carried the trophy inside and set it on her kitchen counter. Then she sat at her grandmother's piano and played. Not the Rachmaninoff this time. Just whatever came to her fingers. Simple melodies, improvised phrases, the kind of playing that wasn't for an audience. Just for herself. The next morning, Claire woke up to 57 new messages and 15 missed calls. The video of her performance had gone viral locally. A reporter from the city newspaper wanted to interview her. A local radio station wanted her to come on their morning show. She went to work anyway. Walked into the office building, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, sat down at her cubicle. Her coworkers had seen the video. They crowded around, asking questions, wanting to hear about the experience. Her manager stopped by, surprised and impressed, but as Claire stared at her computer screen, trying to focus on a data analysis report, she realized something. She couldn't do this anymore. Not like this. Not pretending that a part of her wasn't screaming to be heard. During her lunch break, she called Richard's number. "Richard Thornton, it's Claire. Claire Anderson. From last night? Claire. I was hoping you'd call. Have you thought about the gala?" "I have. And yes, I'd love to perform. But I have a question first. Do you know anyone who needs a piano teacher? Someone who works with kids, maybe beginners." There was a pause. "Are you thinking about teaching?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things. I'm thinking about what makes me happy, what makes me feel alive. And it's not data analysis." Richard laughed. "As it happens, I know several places that are always looking for good teachers, especially teachers who can inspire students. Let me make some calls. Can I get back to you in a few days?" "That would be perfect." Claire hung up and sat there in her car, her heart pounding. This was crazy. She had a stable job, benefits, a retirement plan. Walking away from that to teach piano and maybe perform occasionally? That wasn't practical. That wasn't responsible. But it was real. It was her. 3 months later, Claire stood in a small studio across town, watching a 10-year-old girl struggle through a scale. The girl's name was Jenny, and she'd been ready to quit piano before her mother brought her to the showcase. Now she came twice a week, determined to learn. "Good," Claire encouraged. "Now try it again, but this time, don't think about your fingers. Think about how you want it to sound." Jenny tried again. This time, the notes flowed a little more smoothly. Claire taught 15 students now. Mostly kids, a few adults who'd always wanted to learn. She also worked part-time at a music store to supplement her income. It was less money than her old job. Her apartment was smaller. She'd sold her car and bought a used one. On paper, she'd downgraded her life. But she'd never been happier. She performed at the conservatory gala and received a standing ovation. A video of that performance also went viral. Now she got occasional requests to play at events. Nothing huge. Local fundraisers, community gatherings, sometimes small concerts. She wasn't famous. She wasn't making a fortune. But she was making music. The story of her showcase performance became something of a local legend. The woman who'd been dismissed by a famous pianist and proved everyone wrong. People liked that narrative. But Claire knew the truth was more complicated. Richard hadn't been wrong to doubt her technical skills. 6 weeks earlier, she really had been rusty and out of practice. The difference was that she'd been willing to work, to push herself, to believe she could do more than everyone expected, including herself. She saw Richard occasionally. He'd actually become a friend. They met for coffee sometimes and talked about music, about teaching, about the strange paths life takes. He'd started working with underprivileged students, teaching for free at community centers. "You reminded me why this matters," he told her once.